So in previous lessons on the blind brain, we established that they do have a functioning mentalizing system, and it shows the same response profile as in sighted people. You'll recall the way the fMRI studies went. Blind individuals were put in the scanners, and then they heard stories about characters that had beliefs. And you'll recall that the right TPJ is responsive to other people's thoughts and beliefs. But if we think about these stories, the characters can form beliefs in different ways, based on what they see or what they hear, or in other ways. So Sachs began to wonder what happens in a blind brain when the belief stories are based on seeing, the very kind of sensory system that the blind brain does not possess. Raises a preliminary question. Do blind people have a concept for seeing? What do they understand about what it's like to see? So in this lesson, we'll just take a look at what's going on in the right TPJ for stories that involve beliefs based on hearing versus beliefs based on seeing. And is there a difference between blind and sighted individuals? So first to the issue about having the concept of seeing. Interviews suggest that blind individuals know a lot about seeing, just from hearing sighted people talk about seeing. In addition, unlike touch, vision and hearing both provide information from a distance. So the blind person's experience of hearing may give them insights about some features of vision, like getting information from a distant object. So think about how vision works, right? So light is reflecting off of objects and then into the eyes, and we can get information about objects that are distant from our bodies. In the same way with hearing, pressure waves originating from something in the world are going to reach our ears, and we will extract information about some distant object. So in this way, then, the experience of hearing for the blind person may give them some kinds of insights into as to what it's like to see. So hearing footsteps or hearing voices may be used metaphorically to understand seeing actions or facial expressions. And after all, consider just metaphors and how powerful they can be. Why do we use metaphors? Well, we generally use metaphors to understand some new thing or alien thing or difficult to grasp thing in terms of other things that we already understand and know well. So the blind brain may be sort of metaphorically understanding what it is like to see based on what it is like to hear and touch, those sensory capacities that they still retain. But is this enough then to allow the brain to respond to beliefs based on seeing? So here we'll be looking at, again, activity in the right TPJ to stories about that have characters forming beliefs, but the beliefs are formed either from hearing or seeing. So again, Sachs is going to put blind individuals and sighted individuals into the fMRI scanner, and she's going to expose them through the auditory channel to stories. In the first one, we'll call it the belief seeing story. So here it is. Today, Eric is going to meet his future in-laws. When he gets to the restaurant, Eric sees his fiancée standing with her parents. Her face looks very happy. Right, so we're invited to think about Eric's thoughts and beliefs, but his thoughts and beliefs are based on what he's seeing. So we'll see that we'll call that the belief seeing condition. In the belief hearing condition, the story goes like this. Today, Eric is going to meet his future in-laws. When he gets to the restaurant, Eric hears his fiancée talking to her parents. She is laughing happily. Again, we're invited to mentalize about Eric, but now we know that his thoughts and beliefs are based on what he heard. In the physical feeling story, we have today Eric is going to meet his future in-laws. When he gets to the restaurant, Eric smells something delicious. He feels hungry and ready for dinner. Notice then Eric is having a sensation, a feeling of hunger. So that's not, we're not invited to think about his beliefs and so on, but about a sensation. Previous research indicated that the right TPJ does not respond strongly to this type of story. And then a control story about a bridge, so some physical object and its characteristics. So let's take a look at first the data for the sighted individuals. Here we see the two highest bars representing high activity in right temporoparietal junction for the two stories that involved the other character's beliefs. So whether the belief was based on seeing or the belief based on hearing, high TPJ activity. Notice significantly reduced activity for the feeling condition and the control condition. So what happens in the blind brain? Do we see a similar response profile? If we take a look, it's a different kind of presentation here, but it's the blind brain here. The two highest bars are indeed the two conditions for the beliefs, belief based on seeing and belief based on hearing. And again, the feeling condition and control condition show reduced activity. Now, if we compare the just overall levels of activity, the sighted brain does show higher levels of right TPJ activity for the belief condition than the blind brain, but nevertheless, the selectivity is similar. So the congenitally blind individuals have never seen anything, but their brains are responding to beliefs based on seeing, right? And that raises another question, though. Is the right TPJ making a distinction between beliefs based on seeing or hearing? So we're getting similar levels of activity. Does the right TPJ care whether the belief is based on seeing or based on hearing? And to answer that question, we'll have to introduce another kind of fMRI technique called multivoxel pattern analysis. Okay, so what is multivoxel pattern analysis? The idea is that when you use traditional fMRI techniques, and you'll see this, the red area here represents increased blood flow to the right TPJ when the story has, a character having a belief. But what we don't know is specifically within this region, whether a belief based on hearing or a belief based on seeing is activating the same pattern of bits of brain tissue in this larger region, the TPJ. For example, in this diagram here, we can see within the TPJ, we've separated out these little regions in green and in red. And the idea would be maybe the stories that are based on beliefs from seeing, maybe those stories activate the green areas of TPJ, right? And so all the brain cells in these little green splotches of tissue, they're going to be highly active, they're going to recruit blood flow, and you'll get the traditional fMRI signal. But when the belief is based on hearing, it's a different pattern of activity in these sets of red regions here. But nevertheless, when the red regions are activated, all those millions of cells recruiting blood, you get the same kind of fMRI signal. So the traditional fMRI technique can't distinguish then maybe between these two situations, beliefs based on hearing or seeing. Nevertheless, the brain is making a distinction in the pattern of activity of the TPJ region. So that's the idea of using multivoxel pattern analysis. You're going to be comparing each little voxel within the larger region here, and you want to see whether its activity is correlated with other bits of that region, and that set of activity or that pattern of activity is correlated with one particular type of story, belief from seeing, and then there's a different pattern of activity for stories that involve beliefs from hearing. And sure enough, that is what they find. In sighted individuals, when they do this sophisticated analysis, stories about people who are having beliefs based on seeing show a different pattern of activity in the right TPJ than stories about people having beliefs from hearing. So TPJ is distinguishing beliefs based on the source of the information. So what about in the blind brain? Turns out TPJ is also making a distinction. So even blind individuals we know their TPJ is responding to beliefs based on seeing and beliefs based on hearing, the multivoxel pattern analysis is showing that their TPJ is also distinguishing those two kinds of beliefs. Even though blind people have never seen anything, evidently they have a concept of seeing that is sufficient to allow TPJ to distinguish between beliefs based on seeing and beliefs based on hearing. Now let's just take a moment to consider, why would the brain go to the trouble of distinguishing beliefs based on their source? Well, because depending on whether someone saw something or heard something, that gives us a sense of what it is they actually know and how well they know it, and should we believe it. So it does kind of make sense to keep track of the sources of other people's beliefs, because we might want to make important decisions based on that kind of information. For example, if you're overhearing an argument between two people, well, did you just hear it or did you see it, right? If a gunshot goes off, did you just hear that or did you actually see who it was that shot the weapon? So there are lots of situations where knowing how somebody formed a belief would be important information to act upon.